Hi, Laura.
Well, hello everyone. I really want to start off by thanking you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join me today for a topic that is near and dear to my heart as well as my own scholarship. And it's something that I think we can all benefit from. And I'm excited to see colleagues from my own department because I think this is highly applicable to our field because I applied it to our field in the example that I'll be using in this presentation. But the point of it is to see how you can integrate these ideas regardless of discipline area. So, for those of you teaching future teachers in different academic areas, this is highly applicable regardless of what that content is. So, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because I have a presentation that I will be using throughout this. And I will have time toward the end of this presentation to answer any questions and to also open us up for some dialogue. Alrighty, so the name of this presentation is Making Math Multicultural, how faculty can integrate multicultural understandings into any discipline. So, to give you a little bit of background as to what has inspired this presentation today, my scholarship has been grounded in multicultural understandings from the beginning, from when I started being a researcher, which was during my PhD experience at Lesley University. During that time, I was a fifth grade teacher, and I was doing a lot of this anti racist and multicultural work in my very own classroom at a rural, predominantly white school in Western Massachusetts. And in my classroom, I was finding that there were different strategies that I could use across discipline areas to integrate these ideas. And now, due to the current social justice turbulence that we're all experiencing and noticing in the news, reading about, hearing about, watching, things like that, this is very pressing, and we all need to have a sense of urgency as to what our own roles are because we can all be doing something. So, students have also been expressing a hunger for more on multiculturalism and anti racism in the classroom. In my experience here at BSU, students are very eager to have these conversations. And with partnering with Dr. Korea in the Block Book Club, working with This Book is Anti Racist, we have also felt that students are eager to have opportunities to have such discussions asynchronously as well as synchronously. So I alluded to my own scholarship being an inspiration. And as you can see in here, I had a book that just came out in November, just a couple weeks ago. And it's based on my research that integrates these ideas, defining multicultural understandings through a lens of critical race theory applying to these scenarios that are predominantly white and rural. So it's something that's really important. I brought it here to BSU, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I've done in my teaching. So let me tell you about the course that I've been teaching two sections of that I inherited from my colleague, Dr. Kaysen. So this course is a math methods course in which students take this their first semester of their senior year or their senior experience. So it's the semester that precedes their student teaching, okay? So during this time, they're familiar with the content of math, but they're less familiar with pedagogical approaches to math. So they understand that, math at the elementary level is taught for a specific range for the Massachusetts framework. So they know the content that needs to be covered. They're familiar working with it through their own math courses. But now they're viewing math through a very much education based frame. So in this presentation, I'm going to be referring to that course as my springboard, my inspiration for following these 5 different ingredients that have guided my way in order to be successful in integrating multicultural and anti-racist teaching. So these ingredients include courageous teacher leadership, a shared mission, a safe learning environment, creativity, and flexibility. And if you're able to remember these 5 ingredients, my argument, my mantra for this presentation is that you will be able to foster these sentiments in your own teaching, regardless of what the course is. So we're going to go through each of these 5 now. So the first being courageous teacher leadership. Well, if you're unfamiliar with Brene Brown's work on leadership, this is going to be your little Spark Note version of it. So Brene Brown is someone that I find very inspirational. She has her own podcast. She's written books about leadership. And my PhD is in educational leadership. So I always thought it was funny to myself when I would tell people, yeah, I'm getting a doctorate in educational leadership. The gut reaction time and time again was, oh, so you're going to be a principal or a superintendent? And I'd have to shake my head and say, no, I want to be a teacher leader, meaning I want to embody what it means to be a leader in the role as an educator. And that's what I try to do every single day as an assistant professor in my department of elementary and early childhood education. So to be a courageous teacher leader, Brene Brown pulls apart these different qualities that I feel as though all future teachers and all current professors, regardless of academic discipline, have the power to embody. These include vulnerability, living your values, braving new skills, and cultivating new skills as lifelong learners. So vulnerability, I think, is one of the most important. If I could put a little star on there, I would. Vulnerability meaning the ability to not think too much about your own actions, but really showing who you are, showing your strengths and your weaknesses without hesitation, and not being afraid to make mistakes in front of your students. Having conversations about anti-racism are never going to be absolutely perfect. But it's even worse to not even try. And it's better to make those mistakes, call yourself out and say, hey, maybe I didn't do this right. Or even preemptively say, this might not be perfect, but we're going to give this a go. Or we're going to have a conversation where I need you all to be willing to participate. Living your values refers to walking the walk and talking the talk. So if you say that you are going to be actively investigating your own biases, how are you doing that? So are you doing something in a science course where you are trying to include more diversity in the representation of figures and the literature that you're providing your students? In a math course, are you providing example problems in real life applications where you're using different names from different cultures and looking at statistics that aren't solely from the US? What are you doing? How are you saying you're an anti-racist and actually acting upon it? Braving new skills is basically what I've said through vulnerability and living your values, and that is trying something new and not being afraid to fail. And cultivating new skills as a lifelong learner means this is work that's never going to end. And this is something that we all need to accept, that there's no certificate you're going to receive saying, I'm an anti-racist now. It needs to be an activity that never ends. All right, so the next ingredient is a shared mission. And a shared mission means that you and your students are on the same page as to what you're trying to do in your class. And your shared mission can be very content focused. So say you're an English professor and you are working on trying to uncover the intentionalities of different authors across a certain time period or relating it to the historical context. As long as your students share that mission in the work you're doing, you're more apt to be successful because you both have the same intentionality. Well, at the same time, you can also have the intentionality through your coursework, having a mission based on becoming an anti-racist educator. So in my course, the students had the mission, they wanted to be anti-racist educators. My mission is to cultivate and support them in becoming anti-racist educators. So we have the same trajectory. We know where we're both at. We know our roles in this mission. So the next step is to set the stage with contextualizing the importance of this mission. Talk about the urgency, the timeliness. And there needs to be an intertwined relationship between the student and the professor here, and having a dialogue as to how can I help you and what do I need from you to make this possible. Share the mission with colleagues as well and talk about what's working well and see if they have any interesting takes on your class. I'm fortunate enough to have a department where I feel like I can turn to any one of them and say, I'm trying this out. What are your thoughts? And I feel as though many of them come to me and say, I'm trying this out. What are your thoughts? And that symbiotic relationship, I think, really cultivates new ideas and it broadens our own collaboration in this effort. The third ingredient is a safe learning environment, which is a bit ironic because in our department, this is something that we really try to teach our future teachers to cultivate ourselves. But I think it all starts with modeling. So, modeling a safe learning environment opens up pathways in order to try out something that's super uncomfortable, which is becoming an anti racist person. So students are evaluated on how they cultivate this in their teaching and planning in my course through our own CAP protocols. And if you're not in education, it just means that this is something we have a keen eye for, and it's very regimented as to what the qualities are that foster this safe learning environment. But professors, regardless of academic discipline, have the opportunity to model this in each class. So a safe learning environment should be a part of every workplace. It really, and it can be. As professors, we're preparing students to be colleagues and leaders in whatever occupation they undertake. So, regardless of discipline, understanding what a safe environment looks like and how to cultivate it is going to be a powerful tool. And setting clear expectations that promote inclusion in your syllabus really sets the stage for that safe learning environment. And having it in the syllabus is step one. How many times are you telling your students, please check the syllabus? Do you remember that we have a syllabus? Sometimes I think that that document gets a little bit lost. So, really being able to tie it back into every class is very important to remind students of what that safe environment looks like and have student voice in what it means to them to have a safe learning environment and what they need in order to feel comfortable, especially when exploring these ideas. And in continuation, there are a series of elements that make up a safe learning environment that I'd like to discuss now. The first, assume best intentions and acknowledge that mistakes will happen. And I was talking about that in terms of vulnerability as well, because safe learning environment allows you to be vulnerable and it allows you to not just focus on your strengths all the time because that's comfortable. It's those areas that need work, that need some digging and need to have a magnifying glass put on them that feels uncomfortable. So in your classroom, what are you doing to make sure that students know that what's said in our space, we always assume the best intentions and that we can unpack together if it's not perfect? Encourage uncomfortable conversations and questions. So, by this, I mean half formed thoughts are also welcome, which is the third. So, having these uncomfortable conversations are part of becoming anti racist. And every academic discipline has an opportunity to unpack some very uncomfortable topics because no academic discipline is perfect. There's sexism in the sciences and mathematics that's been rampant throughout history, for example. So, why not discuss these more and tie it back to the content that you're teaching, for example? Calling in rather than calling out is a concept that I'm borrowing from numerous authors in the field of anti racist education. Tiffany Jewell in this book is Anti Racist mentions it, as well as Robin DiAngelo in White Fragility. These are some texts that I highly recommend for those of you who would like to pursue these topics further. Calling in means that you are bringing a person in to discuss something with you personally without an audience. so that if they said something in class, maybe you say to a student, hey, maybe we could touch base after class and talk about what was said. If maybe they said something that they didn't intend to be racist, but it was, and that you need to discuss it together. That's calling in. Calling out is where during class in front of everyone, you call attention to the racist remark, so that everyone can hear and sometimes even appreciate the introspective viewpoint that is necessary in order to undo that understanding and to address that bias that may have been unconscious at the time. Different times and different scenarios, different personalities are going to make calling in or calling out appropriate. There's no formula as to when you should call in and when you should call out. It's very much a judgment call as to what the situation is. In my own personal experience, I've called in more often than I've called out because these are very uncomfortable conversations and they're very individualistic. And you never want to feel like calling someone out in front of the class will embarrass them so much that they have a negative connotation to your classroom. And that learning environment is no longer feeling safe to them. So it needs to be something that you think through thoroughly. And it may be something that over time you get more comfortable with making that decision in the moment. You may need to confer with colleagues and say, this happened. And I'm not sure if this is a whole class discussion or if I should speak with the student individually. It may be a calling in that turns into a calling out as well, where you're talking with a student personally and saying, I think a lot of your peers have done something like this in the past. Do you think we could use this as a learning example with the rest of the class and partner them in to that calling out with the class? So there's many different ways that you can approach this. Once again, being creative and not being afraid to try it is the key to this. Next is own biases by making a plan of how to dismantle them. And what I mean by that is, as a professor, we all have biases, whether they be conscious or unconscious. And I would always tell the story to my students about what it means to unpack your unconscious biases is being very transparent and honest as to where you're at. For example, I am a white female who came from a predominantly white town, and my education, K-12, was predominantly white. So living in that type of scenario for so much of my life has breeded some racist ideals in part of who I am. And I'm never going to be able to erase my past. And that means, unfortunately, there's going to always be some fragments of racism that are part of who I am. And that's really uncomfortable to admit for me. But it's part of my history. And as long as I am proactive in consistently working on unpacking that and dismantling it and continuing to learn, that's all I can do. And it would be more detrimental for me to admit that and do nothing about it. So acceptance is really step one, but you need to have the steps moving forward. So I model that for my students and I can openly admit that to them. And it really is a great segue for them to feel comfortable in my safe learning environment, to discuss with me their own backgrounds and topics that they've realized are some biases that they hold themselves. The last quality is to work to recognize unconscious biases with your students. And that's a natural segue for me addressing my own biases in front of them as inspiration for them to uncover them in your own classroom. So the fourth ingredient is creativity, which, I mean, as faculty here at BSU, aren't we all creative? We have to be, right? Because we're teaching online in a pandemic. And if we want to engage our students, we have to have some air of creativity. So this includes some academic disciplines lending themselves to multiculturalism and anti-racist pedagogy more succinctly than others. And I fully own that. I think the social sciences and the humanities really lend themselves a little bit more seamlessly. But in all honesty, there are some nooks and crannies. You just got to be creative. You got to find those possibilities in every discipline area. So it can be subtle and implicit, it can be bold and explicit, but reflection really is the key so that students and faculty see the value of what that experience brought. So, for example, I had a requirement in my math methods class for my students in the unit that they made. One lesson needed to have a multicultural integration activity. And I can't tell you how many students came to my office hours scratching their heads going, I'm teaching conversion of units. How am I supposed to do this? And I would always start with laughing and saying, I know that this is going to be hard, right? But after some creativity and talking with one another, we were discussing how converting units, well, why do we need to convert units? How come we aren't using all the same units? What countries use different kinds of units and why? All of a sudden, it turned into this global exploration of different countries using different units. And we were having some multicultural connections within a framework that they never thought they would be able to come up with. But it took some digging, it took creativity. So, to do this work across all academic disciplines, I am in no way making the claim that this is going to be seamless and easy for everyone. It is going to be harder for some academic areas than others, but it's possible. You just have to put in the time and the creativity. And it doesn't mean the revamping of a course, it means taking it one lesson at a time and setting goals for yourself as to how you would be able to foster it. Another example, I'm going to give you an out of class example and an in class example now. Dr. Kaysen, like I said, was the one of whom I inherited this course. And she showed me an assignment that she had done in her class previously, which was a connection to literature assignment, which I absolutely loved. I love the cross-disciplinary approach. I love thinking about how math and literacy can go hand in hand. And Dr. Korea and I have talked time and time again about how you need to be able to read in order to be successful in just about every other academic discipline because it is the rock, it's the foundation. So I thought to myself, I've been posing to my students all semester that if they think long and hard enough, they can find a multicultural avenue to integrate into a lesson. Well, I decided to walk my walk and talk my talk here. And I took an assignment that was seemingly strictly a connection between math and literacy. And I decided to make it a connection to multicultural literature. It brought my students' attention to how they can diversify their classroom libraries, and B, how they can also bring multiculturalism into their cross-disciplinary approach. So this assignment that's been a part of the course in the past was revised in this way, and it pushes students to use non-math books as well as some multicultural mathy books that we were able to find. And it was really great to see students' creativity throughout this assignment. It was just turned in last week to me by my students, and I have way too large of a list now of books I need to get because they've opened my eyes as to some really great non-math related stories that they were able to bring into math through creativity. And sharing and reflection after the due date has been an integral part of this because we had different presentations about the books and how we would use them in different scenarios and teaching and instructional pursuits. And an in-class example that I did recently was a scrimmage. And this is where students are sent a prompt a week ahead of class in which they will have a scrimmage. And this is like a little mock teaching scenario that we would do together. And I created this as a response to concerns that had popped up in our book study that we did with our students and learning about their own multicultural understandings and lack thereof in certain areas. So I decided to continue the conversation going with a scenario that I wanted them to play out. And in this, they were in groups of 3, and students were able to teach their group mates, and then they receive glows and grows, in which we talk about what went really well and what needs some work. So they then have reflection time afterward in their small groups, and then we have a large class discussion based upon how it went as well. And once again, that safe learning environment in both small group and whole group needed to be fostered in order to evoke that vulnerability. So in this scrimmage, while teaching a fourth grade lesson on multiplying double-digit numbers, you provide students with various situation problems that revolve around different December events and holidays. So I gave them some examples. And they were asked to create one situation problem that does this to teach your students to choose one of the holidays and be sure to highlight both procedural and conceptual understandings in your instruction. And they were then to pretend that during their guided instruction, they heard a student quietly make an inappropriate comment to another that used a racial slur. And you're not sure if the students all heard it. So what are your next steps? This scenario-based problem was really interesting because we were able to think about calling in versus calling out in our own classroom. And we also were unpacking calling in and calling out in a younger classroom. And we were talking about fourth grade being really middle of the road in the elementary years and what is developmentally appropriate, how we could continue this within that class session and then past that class session, and how those conversations really don't end just because that situation ended. Finally, the last ingredient is flexibility. So some of my best multicultural and anti-racist teaching moments come organically, just in the moment. They're not planned. They pop up and I have to respond to my students. So I just advise you take advantage of these moments as they occur. And that really needs a level of courage because it may feel uncomfortable. And you should be responsive to current events and connections to your field. We all have to stay up to date, but the more we can bring in the different things that are popping up, the more students feel like it's a safe space to discuss that. Also, be kind to yourself because there is no perfect way to do this. But having the courage to get started is your strongest starting point, and it's more detrimental to not even try. So some ending questions for you to be thinking about is how will you foster these in your teaching, these elements, these ingredients? It can start with a single activity lesson, or maybe even you're going through your syllabus and you see a widespread theme that you'd be able to integrate. It's up to you. It's up to your course. I just encourage you, I implore you to try. So thank you very much. Thank you. So I know our time is up. And just before we go, does anyone have any questions, comments, concerns? Laura.
Congratulations on your book.
Well, thank you.
I was going to ask, oh no, don't tell me I forgot. Oh yeah, this doesn't have to do directly. I was just curious, like, were you doing your doctoral work online if you were in Western Mass?
Oh yes, I was. Yeah, I was doing residencies during the summer, but during the year I was teaching fifth grade while getting my doctorate. It was crazy.
Wow. One of our math alumni was asking me if it was possible to do a program like that, so I might be asking you about it.
Oh, please follow up anytime.
Okay.
I have more of a comment than a question. I appreciate that ingredients list because so often we want to do these things, but we're like, how? Like, where do we start? What does it actually look like in a college class to infuse multiculturalism and so forth? So I think that ingredients list was fantastic, but I was a little surprised to see creativity. I wouldn't have expected that right off. So I was anxious to hear you talk about it. And now I understand how creativity can play a role in infusing a multicultural perspective. So thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Jackie. I enjoyed that very much. I like how you narrowed it down because I know it's a big topic. So I think giving us those 5 areas really helps for me to be able to frame it in a way that I think I can try and do it.
Thank you, Marley. I know it's one of those things and that wasn't perfect. And I'm sure there's more ingredients, but that's at least the starting place. Thank you.
Jackie, I'd like to say too, thank you for the very concrete examples on how to do this from a interdisciplinary perspective. And also, I just ordered my electronic book. So your book is on my reading list for the winter break.
I love it. Oh, Kevin, thank you so much. All right. Well, everyone, thank you so much for taking the time. And if you have any questions or want to follow up, please don't hesitate to send me an email. I'd be more than happy to continue any of these conversations or questions that you may have. And I hope you enjoy the rest of this awesome conference.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Jackie. Bye.
Thank
everyone.
you.